It had been singing for 3,000 years, waiting for someone worthy to claim it. The crystal of infinite knowledge floated above a stone platform in the center of a vast chamber, glowing with soft blue light that painted shadows on the walls. Ancient writing covered every surface, telling stories of civilizations that had tried and failed to take the precious artifact. But the crystal was not alone. In the shadows beyond the light, something massive stirred. Two burning red eyes opened like distant stars, each one larger than a human head. The creature that owned those eyes had been waiting just as long as the crystal had been singing. Its name was Vorthak, and it was the guardian of this place. Vorthak stretched its enormous body and felt its joints crack like breaking rocks. 3,000 years was a long time, even for something built to last forever. Its scales, each one the size of a dinner plate, scraped against the stone floor as it moved. The sound echoed through the chamber like distant thunder. The tomb was quiet again. It was always quiet here on this dead planet. Kepler 442c had no wind, no rain, no life except for Vorthak and the crystal. The planet circled a dying red star that barely gave enough light to see by. Most species avoided this system. Entirely. Only the desperate or the foolish came here. Vorthak remembered them all. The first challengers had arrived only 50 years after its creation. They were tall, thin beings made of living crystal from a world near the bright star Altair. They had walked into the tomb with confidence, their bodies shining like diamonds. Their leader had spoken in a voice like wind chimes, declaring that the crystal of infinite knowledge belonged to their people. Vorthak had killed them all in less than 5 minutes. After that came the energy beings from the Veil Nebula. They thought their bodies of pure light would give them an advantage. They were wrong. Next were the machine people from the Forge worlds, sending their strongest robots. Then came the warriors with 4 arms and metal skin. Then the shapeshifters who could become anything they wanted. All of them had failed. Vorthak had been created by a race called the Architects, being so old that even their name was forgotten by most of the galaxy. They had built the Guardian to be perfect at its job. Vorthak was 30 feet tall and covered in scales harder than starship armor. Its claws could cut through steel like paper. Its teeth were like sword blades. Its strength could crush a tank. But the architects had given it something else too: intelligence. They wanted their guardian to be smart enough to face any trick, any plan, any weapon that future challengers might bring. Vorthak could think and learn and remember. Sometimes the Guardian wondered if the architects had made a mistake. Intelligence meant Vorthak could feel bored. It could feel lonely. It could look at the bones scattered around the chamber and wonder if there had been another way. The crystal sang its eternal song, but Vorthak had stopped listening to it centuries ago. The sound just made it feel more alone. The Guardian walked slowly around the chamber, stepping carefully over the remains of old challengers. Here were the crystal people, their shattered pieces still catching the light. There were the metal warriors, their bodies rusted and broken. In one corner lay the bones of creatures Vorthak could not even name, species that had traveled from the far edges of the galaxy for a chance at ultimate knowledge. They had all wanted the same thing. The crystal of infinite knowledge could answer any question, solve any problem, reveal any secret. It could show the cure for any disease, the solution to any puzzle, the location of any treasure. Whoever possessed it would have power beyond imagination. But none of them had been worthy. The architects had been very clear about that. Only a species that had truly earned the right to such knowledge could claim the crystal. Vorthak had been built to test them, to make sure only the deserving could pass. 3,000 years. And no one had passed the test. Vorthak paused at the chamber's main viewing window, a sheet of transparent metal that looked out at the dead landscape of Kepler 442c. The planet's surface was nothing but gray rocks and dried valleys where rivers had once flowed. The red sun hung in the purple sky like a dying ember. But the window showed more than just the planet. The architects had built it to display information from across the galaxy. Vorthak could watch the rise and fall of civilizations, see wars fought between the stars, observe the birth of new worlds and the death of old ones. The Guardian had learned much from watching. It had seen species create beautiful art, heard music from 1,000 different worlds, watched children play games that made no sense but seemed to bring joy. It had observed acts of kindness between strangers, seen beings sacrifice themselves to save others, witnessed love that crossed the boundaries between different forms of life. All of this beauty, all of this wonder, and Vorthak could only watch. Its duty kept it trapped in this tomb, alone with a crystal and the bones of the dead. The monitoring systems suddenly came to life, their soft beeping filling the silence. Vorthak turned away from the window and moved to the control panel, its massive claws surprisingly gentle as they touched the ancient controls. The screen showed a small ship approaching the planet, moving slowly and carefully through the asteroid field that surrounded Kepler 442c. Another challenger was coming. Vorthak felt the familiar mixture of anticipation and sadness. Part of it hoped this new species might be different, might somehow prove worthy of the crystal. But experience had taught the Guardian not to expect much. This ship looked even smaller and more primitive than most. Its energy signature was chaotic and inefficient. Whatever species had built it was clearly young and inexperienced. They would probably last less than a minute. The ship landed near the tomb's entrance with a series of small explosions and a cloud of smoke. Vorthak watched through the security monitors as a figure emerged from the craft. It was bipedal, about 6 feet tall, wearing a bulky white suit that looked like it might fall apart at any moment. The being moved awkwardly in the planet's low gravity, stumbling slightly as it approached the tomb's entrance. Vorthak settled back into its watching position, red eyes fixed on the chamber's main doorway. Soon the ancient seals would recognize the challenger and open the entrance. Then would come the usual pattern of events. The challenger would enter, see the crystal, demand to claim it, and then attack when Vorthak refused to step aside. The Guardian flexed its claws and prepared for another brief, violent encounter. At least this one might provide a few minutes of distraction from the endless loneliness. The massive stone doors began to grind open, their ancient mechanisms still working perfectly after 3 millennia. Light from the corridor beyond spilled into the chamber, and Vorthak heard footsteps approaching. The next challenger was about to enter, and Vorthak was ready to defend the crystal of infinite knowledge once again, just as it had done for 3,000 years, just as it would do for 3,000 more. Most challengers entered the tomb with heavy, determined steps that echoed their confidence or desperation. Some crept in quietly, hoping to surprise the Guardian. Others marched in with armies, their boots making thunder on the stone floors. But these footsteps were light and casual, almost bouncing. They reminded Vorthak of something it had seen through the viewing window long ago, something called skipping. The human entered the chamber whistling. Vorthak blinked its massive red eyes in surprise. In 3,000 years, no challenger had ever whistled. The tune was simple and cheerful, completely out of place in a tomb filled with the bones of the dead. The sound bounced off the walls and mixed with the crystal's eternal song in a way that was almost pleasant. The human stopped, just inside the doorway, and looked around the chamber with obvious interest. It was smaller than most challengers, barely 6 feet tall, with pale skin and dark hair visible through its helmet's faceplate. Its exploration suit was patched in several places and looked like it had seen better days. This was clearly not a warrior from some mighty empire. What caught Vorthak's attention most, however, was the small yellow ball the human was bouncing as it walked. The ball made a soft thudding sound each time it hit the stone floor, then flew back up to the human's gloved hand with perfect timing. Bounce, catch, bounce, catch. The rhythm was oddly soothing. The human took a few more steps into the chamber, still whistling and bouncing the yellow ball. It seemed completely unbothered by the scattered bones or the ominous shadows. When its eyes finally found the crystal of infinite knowledge floating above the central platform, it let out a low whistle of appreciation. "Now that's pretty," the human said to itself in a language Vorthak's ancient translation systems quickly decoded. The voice was male, young, and surprisingly cheerful for someone who had just entered a tomb of horrors. Vorthak waited for what always came next. The challenger would approach the crystal, declare its intention to claim the artifact, and then the guardian would reveal itself. There would be threats, boasts, and finally violence. It was a pattern as old as time. But the human did something unexpected. Instead of approaching the crystal, it walked over to examine the remains of previous challengers. It stopped near the shattered pieces of the crystal beings from Altair Prime, crouched down carefully, and studied them with genuine curiosity. "Wow, you guys really went all out, didn't you?" the human said to the broken fragments. "These patterns are beautiful. Shame about what happened to you." The human stood up and continued exploring, the yellow ball still bouncing in its hand. It examined the rusted remains of the machine warriors, nodded respectfully at a pile of bones that might have belonged to something from the Andromeda Galaxy, and even paused to read some of the ancient writing on the walls. "Can't understand a word of this," the human muttered, tracing one of the symbols with a gloved finger. "But it looks important. Probably warnings about the big scary guardian, right?" That was Vorthak's cue. The guardian rose from the shadows. At the far end of the chamber, its massive form unfolding like a living mountain. Its red eyes blazed with inner fire, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Its claws scraped against the stone floor, and its breathing sounded like wind through a deep cave. Most challengers screamed at this point. Some fainted. A few tried to run. The bravest ones drew their weapons and prepared to fight. The human looked up at Vorthak with mild interest and said, "Hey there, big guy. You look like you could use some company." Vorthak froze halfway through its intimidation display. In 3,000 years, no one had ever greeted it. They demanded, threatened, pleaded, or cursed, but none had ever said hello. The Guardian's mouth was still open, showing rows of sword-like teeth, but no terrifying roar emerged. The human seemed to take Vorthak's silence as an invitation to continue talking. It kept bouncing the yellow ball while looking up at the 30-foot-tall monster without apparent fear. "I'm Kim, by the way. Captain Kim of the exploration vessel Lucky Break. Though between you and me, the name's kind of wishful thinking. This old bucket barely made it through your asteroid field." Kim gestured toward the chamber entrance with his free hand. "Nice place you've got here. Very atmospheric. Been here long?" Vorthak's mind struggled to process this conversation. The human called Kim was talking to it like they were meeting at some kind of social gathering instead of a fight to the death. The Guardian's programming had prepared it for every possible combat scenario, but no one had ever thought to prepare it for small talk. Kim continued bouncing the yellow ball while he waited for an answer. The rhythmic sound seemed to help him think, and Vorthak found itself watching the simple motion with growing fascination. Up, down, up, down. There was something hypnotic about it, something peaceful in its predictability. "Not much of a talker, huh?" Kim said after a few moments. "That's okay. I spend most of my time alone in space, so I'm used to carrying both sides of a conversation. You know what this ball is? It's called a tennis ball. We use them to play games back on Earth. This one's my good luck charm. Had it with me on every deep space mission for the last 5 years. The human tossed the ball a little higher than usual, caught it with a small flourish, then resumed the regular bouncing pattern. The game's pretty simple, actually. 2 people hit the ball back and forth across a net. First one to miss loses. But you can also just bounce it around for fun, like I'm doing now. It's relaxing." Vorthak realized it had been staring at the tennis ball for several minutes without moving. This was not how these encounters were supposed to go. The Guardian should have attacked by now, or at least demanded to know why the human had come to claim the crystal. But something about Kim's casual, friendly manner made violence seem inappropriate. More than that, something about the human's easy confidence suggested he might not be here to steal the crystal at all. Most challengers focused immediately on the artifact, their eyes burning with desire for its power. Kim had barely glanced at it since his first appreciative comment. "So," Kim said, still bouncing the ball, "I'm guessing you're the famous guardian everyone talks about. The stories about you have spread all the way to the Outer Rim territories, you know. They say you've been protecting this crystal for thousands of years. That's got to be the most boring job in the galaxy." The word boring hit Vorthak like a physical blow. It was exactly what the Guardian had been thinking for centuries but had never heard spoken aloud. The human's casual observation cut straight to the heart of Vorthak's existence. Kim seemed to notice the Guardian's reaction. He stopped bouncing the ball and looked up at the massive creature with something that might have been sympathy. "Yeah, I thought so. You know, where I come from, we have a saying, no one should have to spend eternity alone." Kim held up the tennis ball and studied it thoughtfully. "Even the most important job in the universe gets lonely after a while." For the first time in 3,000 years, Vorthak felt truly seen by another intelligent being. This strange human with his cheerful manner and simple yellow ball had somehow understood what millennia of warriors and scholars had missed. The Guardian was not just a monster to be defeated or avoided. It was a thinking, feeling being trapped by its own sense of duty. Kim smiled up at Vorthak, a genuine expression of warmth that the Guardian had never experienced before. Then, in a gesture that would change both their lives forever, the human gently rolled the tennis ball across the chamber floor toward the massive creature's feet. "Want to try?" Kim asked. The ball came to rest against one of Vorthak's enormous claws. The Guardian stared down at the small yellow sphere, its mind racing with possibilities it had never dared to consider. For the first time in 3,000 years, something other than duty called to it. The call of friendship. 3,000 years of existence had not prepared the Guardian for this moment. Every challenger before had come with weapons or demands or desperate plans. None had ever offered to share something. The tennis ball looked impossibly tiny next, to Vorthak's foot, which was larger than Kim's entire body. The Guardian's red eyes shifted from the ball to the human standing across the chamber. Kim waited patiently, his hands empty now, showing no sign of fear or impatience. His helmet's faceplate reflected the blue light from the crystal of infinite knowledge, but his expression remained friendly and hopeful. Slowly, carefully, Vorthak extended one enormous claw toward the tennis ball. The claw was designed for tearing through starship hulls and crushing enemies, but the Guardian forced itself to be gentle. It barely touched the ball, just enough to send it rolling back across the stone floor toward Kim. Kim's face lit up with genuine delight. "There we go, nice and easy." He stopped the ball with his foot, then gave it a gentle kick back toward Vorthak. "See? It's not about winning or losing. It's just about keeping it going." The ball rolled back to Vorthak, who found itself oddly pleased by the simple exchange. This time, the Guardian used the side of its claw to nudge the ball back, putting just enough force behind it to send it halfway across the chamber. Kim jogged over to meet it, his movements bouncy and relaxed despite the low gravity. "You're getting the hang of it," Kim said, stopping the ball and sending it back with another gentle kick. "Most people think you need to hit it hard, but the real skill is in the control." Back and forth the tennis ball went. Each time Vorthak touched it, the Guardian became more confident in controlling its immense strength. Each time Kim returned it, he added a little variation to keep things interesting. Sometimes he used his foot, sometimes his hand, once he even let it bounce off his knee before sending it back. The rhythm was soothing. For the first time in centuries, Vorthak's mind wasn't focused on duty or vigilance or the weight of eternal responsibility. There was only the simple pleasure of keeping the ball moving between them. the gentle challenge of not using too much force, and the growing warmth of shared activity. After several minutes of their strange game, Kim sat down on a broken piece of ancient stonework, still within easy reach of the ball. You know, this is the most fun I've had in months. Deep space exploration is pretty lonely work. It's just me and my ship most of the time, traveling from system to system, cataloging new worlds. Vorthak settled into a more comfortable position, careful not to disturb any of the bones scattered around the chamber. The Guardian had never sat down during a Challenger encounter before, but then again, this wasn't really a challenge anymore. Kim rolled the ball thoughtfully between his hands. What about you? I mean, I know you're guarding the crystal and all, but what do you do for fun? 3,000 years is a really long time to just stand around waiting. The question caught Vorthak off guard. Fun was not a concept the Guardian had given much thought to. Its creators, the architects, had built it with intelligence and awareness, but had never considered that those qualities might lead to desires beyond duty. The Guardian's voice was rusty from lack of use, deep and rumbling, like distant thunder. "I watch," Vorthak said slowly, the words feeling strange in its mouth. "The viewing systems show me other worlds. I have seen civilizations rise and fall. I have observed art and music and celebrations from across the galaxy." Kim's eyes widened with interest. "That sounds incredible. You must have seen things no one else has ever witnessed, but watching isn't the same as participating, is it?" Vorthak was quiet for a long moment, processing this observation. "No," it finally admitted. "It is not the same." Kim nodded, understanding, and gently tossed the tennis ball toward the Guardian. "That's what I thought. I've spent a lot of time, watching too, looking at new worlds through my ship's sensors, cataloging them for others to explore. But the best parts of any journey are the moments when you connect with something new, when you're actually part of the experience instead of just observing it." Vorthak caught the ball with delicate precision and held it for a moment before sending it back. The Guardian was beginning to understand something that had eluded it for millennia. Connection was different from observation. Participation was different from duty. "Tell me about your worlds," Kim said as he caught the ball. "In all those years of watching, what was the most beautiful thing you ever saw?" The question opened something in Vorthak's memory that had been locked away for centuries. "There was a world in the Centauri cluster," the Guardian said slowly. "The beings there were made of living light, but not like the energy creatures who came here to challenge me. These were peaceful, artistic. They painted with light itself, creating patterns in their sky that could be seen from space." Kim leaned forward with genuine fascination. "That sounds amazing. What did the patterns look like?" As Vorthak described, the light paintings. Something remarkable happened. The Guardian's voice grew stronger and more animated, losing the rusty quality of disuse. It spoke of swirling galaxies of colored light that told stories without words, of entire cities that glowed with synchronized patterns during their festivals, of art that existed for only moments before being replaced by something new and equally beautiful. Kim listened with complete attention, occasionally rolling the tennis ball back and forth between his hands, but never interrupting. When Vorthak finished describing the light painters, Kim smiled with genuine appreciation. "You're a really good storyteller," Kim said. "I can almost see it in my mind. Have you ever tried creating anything yourself?" The question was simple, but profound. In 3,000 years of existence, Vorthak had never once considered the possibility of creation. It had been built to guard, to defend, to prevent. The idea of making something new was as foreign to the Guardian as flying would be to a fish. "I was not made for creation," Vorthak said slowly. "I was made to protect." Kim bounced the tennis ball once on the stone floor, catching it easily. "Maybe that's true, but you weren't made to play catch either. and you're pretty good at that. He gestured to the chamber around them. Look what we've created here. An hour ago, this place was just a tomb full of bones and silence. Now it's something else, a meeting place, a friendship. Vorthak looked around the chamber with new eyes. The bones were still there, the crystal still sang its eternal song, and the ancient walls still bore their warnings and stories. But Kim was right. Something had changed. The space felt different, warmer somehow, despite the cold stone and alien. Architecture, is that what this is? Vorthak asked, genuinely curious. Friendship? Kim's smile was answer enough, but he spoke anyway. That's exactly what this is. Two people sharing something simple, enjoying each other's company. Doesn't matter that you're 30 feet tall and I'm just a human with a beat-up spaceship. Doesn't matter that you've got claws that could cut through steel and I've got nothing but a tennis ball. We're friends. The word settled into Vorthak's consciousness like a seed in fertile ground. Friend. It was a concept the Guardian had observed through the viewing systems but never experienced. The warmth that spread through its chest had nothing to do with the crystal's light or the chamber's ancient power sources. Kim stood up and stretched, then picked up the tennis ball. You know what friends do? They look out for each other. They share experiences. They help each other grow. He looked up at Vorthak with a mixture of excitement and something that might have been concern. And sometimes they help each other make difficult choices. Before Vorthak could ask what Kim meant, alarms began blaring throughout the tomb. The ancient warning systems had detected multiple ships approaching the planet, their energy signatures indicating serious military hardware. The viewing screens around the chamber flickered to life, showing sleek warships dropping out of hyperspace and heading directly for Kepler 442c. Kim looked at the displays with a frown. Well, that's not good. Looks like we're about to have company. Vorthak felt the familiar weight of duty settling back onto its shoulders. But now it was mixed with something new and unexpected. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Guardian had something to protect beyond just the crystal. It had a friend. The warning alarms echoed through the tomb like angry thunder. Red lights flashed across the viewing screens as multiple warships entered the planet's atmosphere. Vorthak's systems identified them immediately. Two different fleets, both heavily armed, both heading straight for the tomb. Kim studied the displays with growing concern. Two separate groups. They're not working together either. Look at those formation patterns. They're positioning to fight each other as much as anything else. Vorthak's massive form tensed with old instincts. After 3,000 years, the Guardian knew the signs of approaching battle. But something was different this time. Usually, when challengers arrived, Vorthak felt only the cold weight of duty. Now there was something else, a protective warmth centered on the small human sitting nearby. The larger fleet belongs to the Draknari Empire, Vorthak rumbled, reading the energy signatures. They are warriors who believe strength gives them the right to take whatever they want. The smaller ships carry the unity, a collective consciousness that thinks only evolved minds deserve ancient knowledge. Kim nodded grimly. And they both think I'm just some primitive human who stumbled onto something beyond my understanding. He bounced the tennis ball absently while thinking. They're not entirely wrong about the primitive part, but they're missing the point entirely. The Guardian's red eyes fixed on Kim with curiosity. What point is that? Kim smiled, but it was a sadder expression than Vorthak had seen from him before. That maybe the most valuable thing in this tomb isn't the crystal at all. Before Vorthak could ask what he meant, Kim stood up and walked to the chamber's main control panel. His movements were careful and respectful as he examined the ancient technology. Can you show me how these systems work? I have an idea, but I need to understand what we're dealing with first. Vorthak moved to join Kim at the controls, its massive claws dancing over switches and displays with surprising gentleness. The Guardian had never shared this knowledge with anyone before, but teaching Kim felt natural, right somehow. These screens, Show everything within 100 light years, Vorthak explained. The architects wanted their guardian to be aware of any approaching threats. Here are the weapon systems for the tomb's defenses. Here are the communication arrays. And this section controls the viewing portals I told you about. Kim listened intently, asking questions that showed he understood more about technology than his battered exploration ship might suggest. As they worked together, Vorthak found itself sharing details about the tomb's construction, the architect's intentions, and the long centuries of solitary guardianship. You know what's strange? Kim said as he studied a display showing the architect's original blueprints. They built all of this to test worthiness, but they never defined what worthy actually means. They just assumed their guardian would know it when they saw it. Vorthak paused in its explanations. The human was right. In 3,000 years, the guardian had turned away every challenger, but it had never truly understood what the architects had expected it to find. Strength? Intelligence? Technological advancement? None of the species that had come here had lacked those qualities. I have protected the crystal perfectly, Vorthak said slowly, voicing thoughts it had never spoken aloud. But I have never understood why anyone would want it. Knowledge without companionship seems empty. The words hung in the air between them. Kim looked up at the massive guardian with understanding in his eyes. That's it, isn't it? Kim said, softly. That's what the architects really built this test for. Not to find the strongest or the smartest, but to find someone who understood that knowledge means nothing without someone to share it with. On the screens around them, the approaching fleets grew larger. The Draknari ships were massive and angular, bristling with weapons. The Unity vessels were smaller but moved with perfect coordination, like parts of a single organism. Both groups would reach the tomb within the hour. Kim continued studying the displays, his mind clearly working on some kind of plan. Tell me about the previous challengers. Did any of them ever try to talk to you? Really talk, not just demand or threaten? Vorthak searched its vast memory. Thousands of encounters, millions of words spoken in anger or desperation or arrogance. No, the Guardian said finally. You are the first to speak with me, rather than at me. The first to offer rather than demand. The first to see me as more than an obstacle. Kim nodded as if this confirmed something he had suspected. And in all that time, did you ever want to leave this place? To see those worlds you've been watching? The question struck Vorthak like a physical blow. Want. Such a simple concept, but one the Guardian had barely dared to acknowledge even in its deepest thoughts. To admit desire felt like betraying the duty that defined its existence. I was created to guard the crystal, Vorthak said, but the words sounded hollow even to its own ears. That's not what I asked, Kim said gently. I asked what you want. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant rumble of approaching ships, and the eternal song of the crystal. Vorthak looked around the chamber that had been its entire world for 3 millennia. The bones of the dead, the ancient walls covered in forgotten warnings, the floating artifact that had brought so much conflict and so little joy. Yes, Vorthak whispered, the admission feeling like a dam breaking inside its chest. I want to see the galaxy I have watched for so long. I want to walk on worlds where the light painters create their art. I want to hear music that was made for celebration instead of battle. I want to experience wonder instead of just observing it. Kim's smile was warm with understanding and something that might have been relief. Then why don't you? Because I have a duty, Vorthak said automatically. To who? Kim asked. The architects. They've been gone for thousands of years. The crystal? It was singing long before you got here, and it'll keep singing long after we're both gone. Or maybe your duty is to something bigger than just standing guard. Before Vorthak could respond, the tomb's outer defenses activated. Laser turrets emerged from hidden positions in the walls and began firing at the approaching fleets. The Draknari ships returned fire immediately, their weapons lighting up the planet's dark sky. The Unity vessels spread out in a complex pattern, probing for weaknesses in the tomb's shields. "They're not going to give up," Kim said, watching the battle displays. "Both groups think they have a right to the crystal. They'll fight each other and us until someone wins." Vorthak felt the familiar weight of impending combat. Its body began preparing for battle, muscles tensing and claws extending. But for the first time in 3,000 years, the Guardian hesitated. "Kim," Vorthak said slowly, "if I leave my post, if I abandon my duty, what does that make me?" Kim looked up at the massive creature with eyes full of compassion and certainty. "It makes you free." The words echoed through the chamber like a bell, mixing with the crystal's song and the distant sounds of battle. For the first time since its creation, Vorthak began to consider that duty and desire might not be mutually exclusive. That perhaps the greatest service it could perform was not to guard the crystal, but to become the being the architects had unknowingly created, intelligent, aware, and capable of choice. Outside, the battles raged on. Inside, a friendship was, changing the course of galactic history, one simple conversation at a time. Kim picked up his tennis ball and tossed it gently to Vorthak. "Whatever happens next, we face it together. That's what friends do." Vorthak caught the ball with infinite care and found that the weight of 3,000 years was finally beginning to lift from its shoulders. The battle outside reached the tomb's entrance much sooner than expected. The massive stone doors that had protected the chamber for 3,000 years exploded inward in a shower of rock and ancient metal. Smoke poured through the opening, followed by the sound of heavy boots and mechanical whirring. The Draknari Empire had arrived first. General Tyek strode into the chamber wearing full battle armor that made him look like a walking tank. His 4 arms carried different weapons, each one designed to handle a specific type of enemy. Behind him marched a squad of Draknari soldiers, their scaled skin gleaming in the crystal's blue light. The general stopped short when he saw Kim and Vorthak standing together near the control panels. His reptilian eyes narrowed with confusion and contempt. "Human," Tyke growled in a voice like grinding metal. "You will stand aside. The crystal of infinite knowledge belongs to those strong enough to claim it. Your primitive species has no business here." Kim looked up from where he had been examining the ancient controls, the tennis ball still in his hand. "Actually, I think you might have that backwards. Strength without wisdom is just destruction, and wisdom without compassion is just another form of tyranny." Tyke's response was a harsh laugh. Philosophy from a creature that still uses chemical rockets to reach the stars. Move aside, or be moved. Before anyone could respond, the air in the chamber began to shimmer and change. The Unity had arrived, their energy-based forms seeping through the walls themselves like living light. The temperature dropped as their collective consciousness took shape in the center of the room. "The young species speaks truth, though it lacks understanding," said the Unity, in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "The crystal belongs to those evolved beyond primitive emotion and individual desire. We are the collective mind, freed from the chaos of separate thoughts. We will use the knowledge for the benefit of all existence." Kim bounced his tennis ball once against the stone floor and caught it smoothly. "See, this is exactly what I was talking about. Both of you are so focused on what you think you deserve that you've completely missed the point." General Tyek raised his largest weapon. "Enough words. Guardian, you have allowed this vermin to distract you long enough. Stand aside and let your betters claim their prize." The Unity's energy forms pulsed with agreement. "The Guardian's duty is clear. It must test worthiness through combat. We are prepared for this challenge." Both groups turned their attention to Vorthak expecting the ancient creature to begin the traditional ritual of battle. They had studied the reports from previous expeditions. They knew how this was supposed to work. What they didn't expect was for Vorthak to step protectively in front of Kim. The Guardian's massive form rose to its full 30-foot height, red eyes blazing with a fury none of the previous challengers had ever seen. When Vorthak spoke, its voice shook dust from the ancient walls. "You threaten my friend." The words hit the chamber like a physical force. General Tyke stumbled backward, his weapons suddenly feeling inadequate. The Unity's energy, forms flickered with something that might have been surprise or fear. "Friend?" Tyke snarled, trying to regain his composure. "The Guardian has no friends. It is a weapon, a tool built to test worthiness. It cannot choose favorites." Kim stepped out from behind Vorthak, still holding his tennis ball, but now looking more serious than either group had seen him. "That's where you're wrong. Vorthak isn't a weapon or a tool, it's a person. And for 3,000 years, that person has been alone, watching the galaxy but never allowed to be part of it." The Unity's collective voice carried a note of dismissal. "Impossible. The Guardian is a construct, designed for a single purpose. It cannot deviate from its programming." "Can't it?" Kim asked, looking up at Vorthak with trust and affection. "Tell them what you told me. Tell them what you really want." Vorthak looked down at the small human who had changed everything, then turned to face the assembled aliens. For the first time in its existence, the Guardian spoke not as a defender of ancient law, but as an individual with hopes and dreams. "I want to see the worlds I have watched," Vorthak said, its voice growing stronger with each word. "I want to walk under different stars and hear music made for joy instead of war. I want to learn and grow and experience wonder. And I want to do it with my friend." General Tyke's scarred face twisted with rage. "This is intolerable. The human has corrupted the Guardian with primitive emotions. We will destroy both of them and claim the crystal as our right." The Draknari general raised his weapons and prepared to fire. His soldiers followed suit, their energy rifles charging with deadly light. At the same moment, the Unity began to pulse with building power, preparing to unleash the full force of their collective consciousness. Kim held up his hand calmly. "Before you do anything you'll regret, you might want to consider something. You've both been so busy arguing about who deserves the crystal that you never asked the really important question." "What question?" the Unity demanded. Kim smiled and bounced his tennis ball one last time before catching it firmly. "Whether the crystal actually wants to be claimed by either of you." Both groups paused, confused by this unexpected comment. That was when Kim did something that no challenger in 3,000 years had ever attempted. He turned to the crystal of infinite knowledge and spoke to it directly. "You've been singing the same song for millennia," Kim said to the floating artifact, "waiting for someone worthy to claim you. But what if worthy doesn't mean strongest or smartest or most evolved? What if it means someone who understands that knowledge is meant to be shared, not hoarded?" The crystal's song began to change, its blue light shifting to warmer tones of gold and silver. For the first time since its creation, the artifact seemed to be responding to someone. What if the real test was never about defeating the Guardian, but about befriending it? Kim continued. What if wisdom means knowing when to protect and when to let go? Vorthak looked at Kim with something approaching awe. The human had understood something that had taken the Guardian 3,000 years to learn. The test wasn't about worthiness in the traditional sense. It was about connection, compassion, and the wisdom to value relationship over power. General Take snarled and opened fire. His weapons blazed with deadly energy, aimed directly at Kim's unprotected form. Vorthak moved faster than anything that, large, should have been able to move. The Guardian's massive body intercepted the weapon's fire, scales that had been forged to withstand starship weapons easily absorbing the attack. But this time, Vorthak didn't fight alone. Kim was right beside, the Guardian, not as a burden to be protected, but as a partner. The human's knowledge of tactics and technology, combined with his understanding of both alien groups, allowed him to coordinate their defense with devastating effectiveness. "Tyke's left flank is weak," Kim called out as he dodged behind a piece of ancient stonework. "The Unity is trying to flank from the ceiling. They don't like direct physical confrontation." Vorthak responded with precision that amazed even itself. Instead of the mindless fury that had characterized its previous battles, the Guardian fought with intelligence and strategy. It used its knowledge of the chamber's layout, its understanding of each species' weaknesses, and most importantly, its desire to protect someone it cared about. The battle was swift and decisive. General Tyke's soldiers, trained to fight other warriors, found themselves completely unprepared for a 30-foot monster that fought with both savage power and tactical brilliance. The Unity's energy forms, accustomed to overwhelming individual minds, discovered that a consciousness shaped by 3,000 years of solitary observation was impossible to dominate. Within minutes, both groups lay defeated among the bones of previous challengers. They were alive, but thoroughly beaten, their weapons scattered and their pride in ruins. Kim walked over to where General Tyke lay groaning among the rubble of his shattered armor. "You know what your problem is? You think strength is about taking what you want. Real strength is about knowing when to give instead of take." The Unity's energy forms flickered weakly, their collective voice barely a whisper. This outcome was not calculated. The Guardian's behavior defies all previous patterns. Kim looked up at Vorthak with pride and affection. "That's because patterns can change when you find something worth changing for." The crystal's song had grown louder during the battle, its light now filling the chamber with warm, welcoming radiance. But neither Kim nor Vorthak paid it much attention. They had found something more valuable than infinite knowledge. They had found each other. The chamber fell quiet except for the crystal's changed song and the groaning of defeated challengers. Kim walked slowly around the room, checking on the wounded aliens while Vorthak watched with protective attention. The Draknari soldiers were bruised and battered but would recover. The Unity's energy forms flickered weakly but showed signs of stabilizing. Neither group seemed eager to continue fighting. General Tyke struggled to sit up. His armor cracked, and several of his weapons broken beyond repair. He looked up at Kim with a mixture of confusion and grudging respect. "You did not claim the crystal," Tyke said slowly. "You had the chance. The Guardian would have allowed it. Why?" Kim bounced his tennis ball thoughtfully while considering the question. "Because claiming it would have been missing the point entirely. The crystal isn't a prize to be won. It's a responsibility to be shared." The Unity's collective voice was barely a whisper. "But the knowledge, the power to solve any problem, answer any question. Surely such a resource should belong to those capable of using it wisely." Kim looked up at the crystal of infinite knowledge, still floating above its platform and singing its ancient song. The artifact's light had changed during the battle, becoming warmer and more welcoming. It almost seemed to be waiting for something. "Maybe it should," Kim agreed. "But here's the thing about wisdom. It's not about having all the answers. It's about knowing the right questions to ask." He turned to face Vorthak, who had been listening to the conversation with growing understanding. "So let me ask you the most important question of all. After 3,000 years of guarding this crystal, what do you want to do now?" The massive Guardian looked around the chamber that had been its entire world for so long. The ancient walls, the scattered bones, the eternal blue light of the artifact, all of it had defined Vorthak's existence since the moment of its creation. But now, for the first time, the Guardian had a choice. "I want to leave," Vorthak said simply. "I want to see the galaxy I have watched for so long. I want to walk on different worlds and experience wonders instead of just observing them." Kim smiled with genuine joy. Then let's go. General Tyke struggled to his feet, leaning heavily on a broken weapon. You cannot simply abandon your post. The crystal must be protected. Without a guardian, anyone could claim it. Exactly, Kim said, his smile widening. Anyone could claim it, which means it would finally be free to do what it was really meant to do. The Unity's energy forms pulsed with confusion. We do not understand. The crystal contains infinite knowledge. If left unguarded, it could fall into the wrong hands. Kim walked over to the control panel where he and Vorthak had been working earlier. With the Guardian's patient instruction, he began entering commands into the ancient system. The viewing screens around the chamber flickered to life, showing star charts and communication networks that spanned the entire galaxy. What if the crystal doesn't need to be claimed at all? Kim asked as he worked. What if it just needs to be shared? His fingers moved across the alien controls with growing confidence. Vorthak had taught him well, and the Guardian's 3,000 years of experience with the tomb's systems made the process surprisingly simple. I'm broadcasting the crystal's location and the story of what happened here to every inhabited system in the galaxy, Kim explained. Not as a treasure to be fought over, but as a resource to be shared. Any species with a genuine question, any civilization facing a real problem, can come here and ask for help. Vorthak moved to help with the complex programming, its massive claws dancing over the controls with delicate precision. Without a guardian to fight, there will be no test of worthiness through combat. Only the test of genuine need. Kim nodded enthusiastically. And if someone does try to claim the crystal, for selfish reasons, well, he gestured to the defeated aliens around the chamber. The galaxy will know exactly where to find them. The Unity's collective consciousness seemed to be struggling with this concept. But without control, without oversight, the knowledge could be misused. Knowledge is always misused by someone, Kim replied calmly, but it's also used well by others. The trick is making sure the good outweighs the bad. And the best way to do that is to make knowledge available to everyone, not just to whoever can fight the hardest. As they finished programming the broadcast, systems, the crystal of infinite knowledge, began to sing more loudly. Its light filled the chamber with warm radiance that seemed to express approval of their decision. For the first time in millennia, the artifact sounded truly happy. General Tyke watched the proceedings with growing amazement. You are giving away the greatest treasure in the galaxy. Your species could have used it to become the dominant power in known space. Kim looked at the general with sympathy. That's exactly why we can't keep it. Power like that corrupts everyone eventually. But shared knowledge, freely given, that makes everyone stronger. He turned to Vorthak, who had finished activating the broadcast systems. Ready to see the galaxy? The Guardian looked around the chamber one last time. 3,000 years of duty, of loneliness, of watching without participating. All of it had led to this moment, to the choice between eternal service and uncertain freedom. I am ready, Vorthak said. Together, they walked toward the chamber's entrance, stepping carefully over the scattered bones of previous challengers. Kim bounced, his tennis ball as they walked, the familiar rhythm soothing in the aftermath of battle. Where will we go first? Vorthak asked. Kim grinned up at his enormous friend. I was thinking we could visit those light painters you told me about. I'd love to see art that exists just for the joy of creating it. And after that, we'll find out together. The galaxy's a big place, and we've got all the time in the world to explore it. As they reached the entrance, Kim paused and looked back at the crystal of infinite knowledge. The artifact pulsed with warm light, its song now a melody of gratitude and freedom. Soon, beings from across the galaxy would come here not as conquerors, but as seekers, asking questions and sharing knowledge freely. You know what the best part is? Kim said to Vorthak, as they stepped out into the planet's eternal twilight. We don't need infinite knowledge to be happy. We just need each other. Vorthak's rumbling laugh echoed across the barren landscape. I am beginning to understand why the architects gave me intelligence. They knew that someday someone would teach me how to use it. Kim's ship, the Lucky Break, sat waiting for them, near the tomb's entrance. It looked even more battered than before, but Kim patted its hull affectionately as they approached. She's not much to look at, but she's got good bones. Think you can fit in the co-pilot's seat? Vorthak examined the small vessel with amusement. It will be cozy. The best adventures usually are. As they prepared for departure, Kim pulled out his tennis ball one last time. Want to practice? Your catch while I get the engines warmed up? Vorthak carefully caught the yellow ball in one massive claw, then gently tossed it back. The simple game that had started their friendship continued as Kim worked on the ship's systems, the sound of their play mixing with the hum of preparing engines. Behind them, the tomb's communication arrays began broadcasting to the galaxy. The message was simple: knowledge freely shared, questions welcomed, wisdom available to all who approached with genuine need and open hearts. Within hours, the first ships would begin arriving, not armies or treasure hunters, but scholars and scientists, artists and philosophers, ordinary beings with extraordinary questions. The crystal of infinite knowledge would finally fulfill its true purpose, not as a prize to be won, but as a gift to be shared. Kim and Vorthak's ship lifted off into the star-filled sky, carrying the galaxy's most unlikely friendship toward adventures yet unknown. In the cargo hold, carefully secured in a place of honor, sat a simple yellow tennis ball, the small object that had changed everything. The ancient monster was free, the human had found a friend, and the galaxy would never be the same. Sometimes the most powerful force in the universe is something as simple as offering to play catch.